I inherited a property in the woods. What I saw there still haunts me. My name is Rebecca. I'm in my early 30s now, and I need to tell you about the worst weekend of my life. A weekend I spent alone on a property that wasn't supposed to be scary. A property that was supposed to be a financial opportunity. A property that nearly broke me psychologically. Most people think that if something paranormal or dangerous is happening, it will be obvious. You'll know immediately. You'll see it coming. But the truth is far more insidious than that. Sometimes the scariest thing about a place isn't what you see. It's what you almost see. The shadows at the edge of your vision. The sounds that don't quite make sense. The overwhelming feeling that something is very wrong even though you can't prove it. I spent one night on a 4-acre property in the middle of nowhere. And by the time that night was over, I was willing to give away thousands of dollars worth of real estate just to never go back. What happened there wasn't supernatural. At least I don't think it was. But it was so deeply unsettling that I still have trouble sleeping in complete silence. If you think you're brave, these stories will test that. If you think you trust your instincts, think again. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because what happened to me on that property could happen to anyone who inherits land they've never visited. Anyone who decides to spend a night alone in the wrong place. This is the story of my night in the woods. The inheritance. When my uncle passed away, I found out I'd inherited a property. A small piece of land in a wooded area in the middle of nowhere. I know that sounds ungrateful. But if you had seen it, you would have laughed just like the rest of my family did. It was a 4-acre plot with a self-contained cabin, completely isolated. No neighbors for miles in any direction. My family teased me relentlessly with countless haunted house stories. They joked about the property being cursed, about it being in the middle of nowhere for a reason. But I was practical. It was an asset. Even if the cabin was falling apart, even if the land was worthless, I could sell it and get something out of this unexpected inheritance. So I decided that I might as well go out and take a look one weekend. But no one was available to go with me. My mom was afraid for me and made me promise to call her every night. I left Friday afternoon and planned to come back on Saturday. I drove a van. So I decided that I would sleep in it. Even though there was a self-contained cabin on the property, I was told there was no running water, so I'd already resigned myself to fixing the place up and selling it, even if I got a low price for it. It was a 4-hour drive from my home, 4 hours through increasingly rural areas, 4 hours watching the world around me get emptier and emptier. When I pulled up to the driveway on the 4-acre property around 5 in the afternoon, I felt shivers going down my spine. I couldn't put my finger on why that happened, but I ignored it and continued to drive. The driveway was long and winding through dense trees. The sun was already getting lower in the sky, and the forest was getting darker. The trees were so thick that I imagined myself getting lost. But soon I saw the cabin, which seemed too new to be in these shabby surroundings. There were a couple of abandoned old cars near the property and a haphazard pile of rotting wood near the shed, which was next to the cabin. When I got out of my van, I felt icicles running through my veins. Maybe it was nerves, but I was sure I saw a shadow in the woods. I felt stupid, but I called out, "Hello." Of course, nothing was there, and the shadow disappeared. I actually thought it might have been a bear. So I raced to the front door, fiddled with the keys, eventually unlocking the door and letting myself in. The cabin was bare, no furniture, apart from an old table and only one old chair. It was obvious that my uncle had started doing the place up. but his death had intervened. Thinking of him, I worried that maybe his ghost might be haunting the cabin. Little did I realize at the time that the scariest things were still to happen outside. I started to wonder if I would even stay at all, but I found myself dragging my bags and their mattress inside anyway. I sat at the table and ate a makeshift meal, making mental notes about what I had to do to get the place ready for sale. Then I heard a metallic noise, not far from the back door. I couldn't be sure, but it sounded like a knife or an axe being sharpened. Fair enough. I do have an overactive imagination, but the sound was very real to me. I got up and walked over to the back window to look outside. Haunted stories usually don't scare me one bit. But when I looked out the back window, there was nothing to see at first. As soon as I moved to go back to the table, something caught my attention out of the corner of my left eye. I gasped when I turned back. There was what I thought was a huge, hulking silhouette staring at me from the edge of the woods. It was too small to be a bear. But why would there be a person out here in the middle of nowhere? I moved over to the window and had a second look, but it was gone. I could have kicked myself for not bringing a weapon with me. I didn't even have a multi-tool, even though I'm female and was quite tough at the time. I'd been a tomboy all my life. I always had tools on me, but all I had at the time was a flashlight. Deciding not to be brave, I stayed in the cabin and wrote notes in my journal. I tried to distract myself, to convince myself that what I had seen was just a trick of the light, just my imagination running wild in a lonely place. But then I heard the metallic sound again. I froze. This time I was sure that it was inside the cabin. I got up and nervously crept around the main room saying, "Who's there?" Believe me when I tell you that I jumped out of my skin when a shadow walked past the window. The frightening thing was I couldn't tell if the shadow had been in front of the window or outside of it. In a panic, I ran over to the window, and once again I saw a huge silhouette, closer to the cabin this time, but still at the edge of the woods. Rooted to the spot, I stared and barely blinked, trying my best to see if it was real. It seemed like hours went past, but eventually I had to blink. When I did, the shadow disappeared. I really thought a crazy man was watching me, and I decided that I had to leave. But what if he was waiting for me outside? I gathered up my things and ran to the front door. But I stopped when I heard something fall over in the next room. Was he inside? I had no way of knowing, and I did not want to find out. I opened the door and ran as fast as I could to the van. I was so grateful when the engine started immediately. While driving off, I looked in the rear-view mirror, and I swear I could still see the outline of a person. But when I slowed down for one last look, they were gone. The night begins. Let me back up and describe that night in more detail, because the progression of events is important, each moment building on the last, each occurrence making the next one feel more sinister. I had arrived at the property around 5 in the afternoon. The sun sets around 6 in November, so I had roughly an hour of usable daylight. I spent that first hour doing a walk around of the property, checking out what I had inherited, trying to assess the actual value of the land. The cabin itself was maybe 900 square feet. It had been partially renovated. There was a kitchen area, a main living space, a bedroom, a bathroom with no running water. Outside, there were the remnants of my uncle's projects, an old shed, some abandoned cars, piles of wood. Everything was surrounded by dense forest, the kind of forest that swallows sound, that makes you feel completely isolated from the rest of the world. By the time the sun started setting, I was already feeling uneasy. There's something about being alone in the woods as darkness falls. Something primal. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. Every rustling sound becomes a potential threat. Every shadow becomes a figure. Every normal woodland noise becomes something sinister. I told myself I was being irrational. I was a grown woman. I had a van with a good engine. I could leave any time I wanted. But something about that place made me not want to be outside. I locked myself in the cabin, and I waited for darkness to fully fall. I lit some candles. I had brought a camping stove and some food. I made myself some tea and a simple dinner. Around 7 o'clock, after I had finished eating, I heard the first unusual sound, a metallic noise from somewhere outside. It sounded like metal on metal, like someone sharpening a blade. I went to the back window and looked out into the darkness. There was nothing to see, just the black silhouettes of trees against a slightly less black sky. I told myself it was probably just wildlife. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe something falling against metal. Maybe the wind moving something loose on the property. But I didn't really believe that. The sound continued intermittently for the next hour. Every time it happened, I would go to the window and look out, and every time I would see nothing. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Around 8 o'clock, I realized I hadn't called my mum like I promised. I tried my cell phone, no signal. The property was in a dead zone. So I decided to go outside to find higher ground. Maybe I could get a signal from the top of the driveway. I grabbed my phone and my flashlight, and I opened the front door. The cold hit me immediately. November in rural areas gets genuinely cold when the sun goes down. I made my way to my van, thinking I would drive to higher ground rather than walk. But before I got there, I noticed something that made me pause. The door to the shed was open. I was absolutely certain it had been closed when I arrived. I have a very good memory for details, and I specifically remembered noting that the shed door was old and rusted and definitely closed. Now it was open about a foot. I shone my flashlight in that direction, but I couldn't see inside. The darkness inside the shed was absolute. My flashlight beam just disappeared into it. I got in my van and drove to find cell signal rather than investigate further, which was probably the smart choice. I found enough signal at the top of the driveway to call my mum. I told her everything was fine. The property was as expected. I was planning to sleep in the van and head out in the morning. She told me to keep the line of communication open, to call if anything felt wrong. I promised I would. Then I drove back down to the cabin. And that's when things started getting worse. The escalation. It was around 9 o'clock when I parked the van near the cabin and decided to go back inside. I'd convinced myself that the metallic sounds were just natural sounds, that the open shed door was something I had misremembered, that the feeling of being watched was just the isolation getting to me. I locked the cabin door behind me, and I settled in with my journal, planning to write for a bit and then try to sleep. I sat at the old table, the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls, and I tried to focus on the journal, on making notes about the property, on thinking about practical things like selling the land and moving on with my life. But it was hard to concentrate. The cabin felt different after dark. The walls seemed closer, the silence seemed louder, and every small sound from outside made me look up from my journal. Around 9:30, I heard the metallic sound again, This time it was unmistakably close to the cabin. I got up and went to the back window, and that's when I saw it. A silhouette, definitely human-shaped, standing at the very edge of the tree line, maybe 30 feet from the cabin, just standing there, motionless. I kept the lights off, hoping that whoever it was couldn't see me. I watched the silhouette for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two. Then it simply disappeared back into the darkness of the trees. I stood there at the window for a long time, heart pounding, trying to convince myself that it was a deer, or a tree trunk, or some kind of optical illusion created by shadows and candlelight. But I knew what I had seen. I knew it was a person, and I knew they were watching the cabin. I locked every door and window in the small cabin, even though locking them seemed pointless against someone who clearly wanted to get in. Then I tried to wait out the night in the cabin. I sat at the table with my flashlight on a high beam, my phone in my hand, even though I had no signal and couldn't call for help. The hours crawled by. Every noise made me jump. The wind through the trees sounded like footsteps. The settling of the old cabin sounded like someone moving inside. Around 11 o'clock, I heard something fall over outside. It sounded like it came from near the shed. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it out the front window. For just a moment, I saw a dark figure moving near the shed. Then nothing. I tried again to call my mom. Still no signal. The isolation was suffocating. I was completely alone, with someone or something outside, and no way to call for help. I made a decision. I was going to leave. Right then, in the middle of the night, I was going to pack my things and drive away. I gathered up my bags as quickly as I could, throwing things haphazardly into my duffel bag. I was moving so fast that I barely noticed when I heard the sound of breaking glass. It came from the back of the cabin. From the bedroom, someone had broken through the window. That's when my fear turned into pure adrenaline. I didn't stop to think about what I was doing. I didn't stop to confirm what I'd heard. I just ran for the front door. I unlocked it, yanked it open, and sprinted toward my van. Behind me, I heard the sound of something crashing inside the cabin. Someone was inside, moving through the cabin. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely get the van keys into the ignition, but I managed it. The engine started, and I slammed on the accelerator. The van lurched forward, kicking up gravel as I raced down the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see a figure emerging from the cabin, a dark shape in the darkness, running toward the van, but I was already moving too fast. The driveway curved and twisted through the trees, and in my panic, I almost went off the road twice. But I made it to the main road. I didn't slow down for several miles. When I finally did, I was shaking so badly that I could barely control the van. I pulled into the first gas station I could find, a 24-hour place off the highway. I parked directly under the lights, outside the front door, and I sat in the van for a long time, just breathing, just trying to process what had happened. When I finally went inside the gas station, the clerk took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I must have looked absolutely terrified. I called the police from the gas station, told them about the property, about the figure I had seen, about the broken window. A deputy came and took a report, but when we drove back to the property, there was no sign of anyone. The broken window was just a broken window. Could have been broken months ago. There were no footprints, no evidence of anyone being there. The deputy was polite, but skeptical. He suggested that maybe I had been more scared than I realized, that maybe the isolation and the darkness had played tricks on me. Maybe the broken window was pre-existing. Maybe the figure I saw was just a shadow, and maybe I should consider having the property assessed for sale. What I found out, I never went back to that property. I tried. I really did. A few weeks later, in broad daylight, I attempted to return. I told myself that whatever happened that night, it was probably in my head, that I was being irrational. But when I got within a mile of the driveway, I had a full panic attack. My hands went numb. My vision started blurring. I couldn't breathe properly. I had to turn around and drive back. I couldn't go back to that place. So I decided to just give it away. I contacted my dad, and I asked him if he wanted the property. He seemed surprised at first. He knew it was an asset. He knew I could sell it and make money. But I told him I didn't care. I didn't want it. I would rather have nothing than spend another minute thinking about that place. He agreed to take it. I signed the deed over to him, and I tried to move on with my life. But what happened next is the part that still confuses me. My dad went to the property a few times. He cleaned it up. He assessed it. He looked into repairs and renovations, and he said everything was fine. There was no evidence of anyone living there. No signs of trespassing. Nothing unusual. He asked me to describe what I had seen, what I had heard. And when I told him everything, he just nodded. And he said maybe it was the stress of the inheritance. Maybe it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But he never experienced anything strange. He never saw any figures in the woods. He never heard any metallic sounds. And over the years, nothing bad has happened on that property. My dad eventually sold it for a decent price to someone who wanted to develop it. And as far as I know, there have been no problems since. So, what does that mean? Did I imagine everything that happened that night? Was it a combination of isolation, darkness, and an overactive imagination? Or was there someone watching that property? Someone who was scared off by my rapid departure? Someone who has never returned? I honestly don't know. But I know what I felt that night. I know the fear was real. I know the broken window was real. I know I saw something or someone, and I know that whatever it was, I was not safe there. Epilogue. What it means, it's been over a decade since that night, and I still think about it regularly. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out when I did, if I had waited another hour, or tried to call the police from inside the cabin, if I had gone to investigate the metallic sounds, or looked more carefully at those silhouettes. What I've learned from that experience is that sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost or a demon or something supernatural. It's the unknown. It's the not knowing whether the danger is real. It's the inability to confirm your fears, to prove that you weren't crazy. That night I couldn't call for help. I couldn't verify what I was seeing. I only had my instincts, and my instincts told me to run. Whether there was actually someone there or whether my mind was playing tricks on me, the decision was the same. Get out. Get to safety. Don't look back. I never regretted giving away that property, because the cost of owning it would have been my sanity. And some things are worth more than money. If you ever inherit property you've never visited, if you ever find yourself alone in a place that feels wrong, listen to that feeling. Don't rationalize it away. Don't tell yourself that you're being irrational. Don't convince yourself to stay just one more night, because sometimes the only way to survive is to trust your gut and get out.